Welcome to Starbound. My name is the Voice Ogre. I'll be your narrator today. But before we get started with the video, let me ask to see if you're subscribed real quick. If you're not, it's fine, but it's free, and it will let you know whenever we post new videos. Thank you. Brock Hansen was beginning to have second thoughts about this whole academy business. On the one hand, he really wanted to hate it all. The only reason he's here is because his father wanted the clout of having his son be the first human to attend the most prestigious academy in the galaxy. But, on the other hand, Brock was starting to like this place. The morning commute is 20 minutes in a trans-atmospheric shuttle from his private dorm, but the minutes were short. Every last one of them was spent taking in an awe-inspiring view that he might never tire of. There's just something about the way the 100 spires of Sunspire Academy gleam in the light of Aureus. That's the name of the star here. It's a bright one, golden-hued from the atmosphere and hard to look at just like Sol, but a bit more on the golden side of things. Especially when the dawn light reflects off the cityscape that is Aureus 2. An entire planet in Ecumenopolis. The kind of thing fiction has only dreamed of, and there's a second one in the same system. Too far to see from here, of course, but Aureus Prime is even more heavily encased in shiny metal alloys than the second planet is. Capital of the Orion Alliance and homeworld of the Orions themselves. You know, ever since coming here, Brock really hasn't gotten much of a break. There is, of course, his time at his private dorm, but a lot of that is just spent crashing out or studying. He's been so surrounded by the cavalcade of species and other students and how quickly everything moves that he really hasn't taken the time to consider what he's even looking at. But here, in this shuttle, these 20 minutes he has nothing to do but consider things. As his eyes took in the kaleidoscopic view of the academy, his thoughts finally wandered to the Orions themselves. They had a funny look to them. Not freaky per se, just a bit odd. They were tall, with pointed ears and somewhat longer lived than humans, sort of like elves. But their heads had no hair, and they came up to a rounded point, sort of like the Green Goblin's helmet, if you've seen Spider-Man. Which Brock has. Of his many hobbies, most of which he earned from endless days of free time after his stellar academic performances and lack of needing a job, one of them is binge-watching really old movies. There's a charm about the old stuff. Simpler times. But back to the Orions, their skin is unlike anything Brock had ever seen. Apparently, at least according to what information he's gleaned from the local internet, their skin is metal. Not like super heavy I'll be back Robo Golem or whatever kind of metal, just a little bit thin, sort of like tinfoil. Crumples like it too, especially for the older ones. The older they get, the more crinkly they become until you get the ones like Professor Oubliette, who looks like a walking tube of really badly beaten up tinfoil. Not all of them are golden. Some Orions are silvery or coppery. Apparently there's even some dark black charcoal ones out there, but Brock hasn't seen any. Apparently it has mostly to do with their diet. So, of course, the better off they are, the more gold they are. And then there's their eyes. Also varied in the same color range, but huge and no pupils, just solid silver or gold or even a fiery red. You can't really tell where they're looking, except by where their head's pointed. That at least is easy to tell. The most distinct features of Orions is their face markings. It looks shockingly like ancient Egyptian makeup, except you can clearly tell that this isn't just a paint job. They shine and sparkle in the light like those old holographic art cards. They get more complex as they age, so you can usually guess how old any Orion is by the crinkliness of their skin and the complexity of their face marks. They have a special word for it, but Brock cannot for the life of him pronounce most words in their language. He's just thankful the names aren't as punishing. Then there's those gourds. If you want to talk about skin, they are certainly special. Pale white, every one of them. So much so that you can see the blood in their veins near the surface. Like black etching all over their body. But that doesn't mean that their skin is thin, just transparent. And scaled thick ones too. Almost totally transparent like glass, so it's hard to see them from a side angle. Also makes them tough as nails. Their faces are flat, long openings between their eyes instead of a nose. Oh, and their eyes? 4 of them. All in binoculars so that their depth perception is ridiculously good. Has to be anyways, Brock never exactly felt like asking. Another shining example of special skin. Brock isn't sure why his thoughts are focusing so much on that. Maybe it has to do with an excessive amount of skincare product that Marcus insists Brock uses every day. A rich kid has to maintain appearances, whether he wants to or not. Or maybe it's because he's got a really bad itch around his neck. Maybe he was allergic to one of those things he sampled yesterday at the cafe. Whatever, it's just an itch, so as long as he doesn't scratch it too bad, it won't mean a thing. Anyways, another shining example of special skin are the Trapians. They are classic aliens. They look exactly like humans in body paint and hair dye. Blue skin, mostly. Though Brock's seen lesser and greater shades trending toward green, yellow, and purple, but always some shade of blue. Indigos, sea greens, some are pale like clouds. Hair is always ginger, though. Also different shades, but never anything like brown or black. Red, orange, and some are even very yellow blonde. And platinum hair exists too, but Brock has only ever seen one of them with that, and she was a newscaster on one of the billboards his shuttle passes every day. While he's here monologuing about aliens to himself, he has to mention Fleek. One of a kind. Although, frankly, Sunspire seems to have a lot of one-of-a-kind students. Species from all over the galaxy, including the Combine way out on the other side with hundreds of different ones. But Fleek? Guy is an actual wolf man. Or wolf boy, wolf person? Actually, now that Brock thinks about it, he doesn't know if Fleek is a guy or a girl or whatever else. They sound male, but it's also an alien, so that doesn't mean jack shit. Whatever they are, they're basically a wolf on two legs, with these almost comically perched spectacles on his snout. No idea how he keeps those balanced, or why he even has them in the first place when science has long since cured most eye diseases. Maybe it's species-specific? Chuckling a bit at the thought of an entire species of big bad wolves in granny outfits was also the mark of the end of the commute. The shuttle finally landed once again on that breathtaking vista. High up on the central spire, air breathable thanks only to artificial systems keeping it all together. Dawn sun washing over a wide open ring of activity that surrounded the entire diameter of the spire at this level. The very edge was a long series of shuttle drop-off parking, followed by a clearly intentionally designed project in architectural poetry. From up here, you get a direct look at everything the Sunspire represented. Every subject had some representation. Murals depicting its history, transparent floors looking in at the classes, the Great Wall of Poetry, as Brock likes to call it, in which sits the Greater Wall of exotic plants. Apparently, at least one specimen of every plant species known in the galaxy exists somewhere in the Sunspire on one of these walls. 100 spires, multiple levels, each with rings like this one. All of them designed just so. Though Brock also knew that of all of them, this was the most designed. It's the premier ring reserved only for honor students, which is the Sunspire equivalent to the rich kids. Brock hates that term. He never thought of himself as a rich kid. Everyone else has to take public transport to one of the lower rings or even from the sprawl at the base of the tower and then a very long elevator ride. And that's for students of this spire. There are 100 of them. Each of them equivalent to an Earth college, except with approximately the same surface area as a mountain. Tens of thousands of students, hundreds of professors, each of which teaches several classes across all of the Academy's various courses. Each spire offers a course on every subject in the known universe. That's one thing that's different about the Sunspire compared to Earth colleges. There are no degrees. Instead, you attend for as long as you like, or can for some. And when you're done, you get a digital certificate tied to your DNA that lists your qualifications based on what courses you completed. There are some who've taken it upon themselves to pass every single course on the Sunspire. All of them are professors themselves, splitting their time between studies and teaching. Brock was snapped out of his thoughts by the usual suspect. Once again, Lariel Trinidad is here to greet him. Day 3 and Brock can already tell that this one is going to be a headache. He's no stranger to attention. He was popular back on Earth because of his father's shadow, so he knows the type. Gold digger through and through. The only thing she cares about is her image. And she's definitely the spoiled princess type too, given how flippant she becomes when Brock politely declines her requests. The idea of not having her way must be like poison. Good. Brock hates being seen as a rich kid, so if he can make it clear that he isn't chasing clout, all the better.
Hello, Brock. How was your commute?
She says, with all the practiced, disingenuous grace of a pop star. Brock was not keen on letting her in that angle. The same as yesterday and the day before. 20 minutes of watching the Academy glitter like a jewel. The only sad thing about it is when it's over. Nothing else seems to glitter. It just doesn't compare. And that one got under her skin. Not just not about her, but indirectly saying that she doesn't look like much. Subtle, indirect, polite. Most people would find it to be a wistful remark on the Academy's beauty. But to her, she knew exactly what Brock meant. She opened her mouth to retort, but Brock interrupted. Oh, whoops. Looks like I left a bit late. It's almost time for Oubliette's morning lecture. Gotta run. See you there. And off he ran. A light jog. He wasn't actually late, but the last thing he wants was to get into a more direct confrontation with what amounted to an alien TikTok celeb. On the way there, he passed by Bjorngir, a gourd that Brock didn't quite know what to make of yet. He's big, imposing, and the way he talks pens him as some kind of jock or bully, but he hasn't actually done anything in that vein that Brock's seen, so he isn't so hasty as to make a judgment on him. But he does seem aggressive, always looking at Brock like he's about to start a fight, but never does. He also brushed past Fleek, turning as he does so and actually stopping for a moment. Oh, sorry, I didn't mean to bump into you. You okay? The candid Canid readjusted his spectacles. He hadn't dropped anything, and he simply responded.
Yes, I am fine. It was barely a brush against my fur, no actual impact.
Brock was relieved. At least, he may not like L'Ariel, but there's no excuse to be rude to the other students. That's good to hear. Brock hatched an idea. He needs a way to avoid L'Ariel more effectively. He can't make up new reasons to ditch her forever, and he doesn't want to make an enemy of the entire school by directly opposing her. At least, not yet. Just like at the fancy schools his father sent him to back on Earth, he has to be careful who he angers. Everyone here is rich and influential in some way, which means it's much better to make friends than enemies. But even so, Brock isn't going to be friends with someone like L'Ariel. The first day he met her, he was very honest. He'd never heard of her, so all he gave her was a polite greeting before continuing on his way. It wasn't later until he overheard whispers from other students that he realized she was some kind of internet celebrity and he'd just rejected her. So he did a little bit of digging and yeah, that's all he needed to know. She's a fashionista, obsessed with looks and glamour and glitter, daughter of the head designer of the most popular women's clothing line in the galaxy. The way she walks and talks reeks of prep, and he's seen the kind of nasty stuff prep girls do to people that they don't like. So he has to toe a fine line until he has enough influence of his own to make sure she doesn't get any fancy ideas. Which means that for now, he needs a convenient excuse to turn her down. Which means he needs plans. Hey, so I noticed that you're pretty whiz in the classroom. Fleek sighed. Actually sighed. Whoops, Brock thought. He failed to consider that Fleek was the bookie type, which means he's probably heard that line before and probably not from people acting in good faith. Brock played it off lightly, a simple raised gesture. Whoa, sorry, I didn't mean it like that. I was just curious is all. You seem pretty smart. You always seem to be doing some kind of theoretical physics calculation on that pad of yours, and Fleek's entire expression shifted in an instant. Eyes widened, ears perked up.
You can tell it's theoretical physics?
Okay, bit of a weird question, but sure, let's roll with it, Brock. Yeah? I mean, it definitely doesn't look like algebra, and I don't see any molecular formulas, so when it comes to math and numbers, there isn't a whole ton left to guess. I didn't recognize any of it, so it couldn't have been normal physics since all of that ends at high school. And someone as smart as you had to be theoretical. Lucky guess. Really, there's entire subjects of non-physics related math and computing, but hey, Brock won worse odds before.
I see. Yes, I suppose I am known for my calculations. But how did you know that it was... Are you okay? Does human skin normally...
His entire head tilted in obvious confusion. Brock had to quell the intrusive thoughts likening the adult alien in front of him to a confused puppy. Brock looked down, but he couldn't quite see anything. Fleek clarified.
No, on your neck? I believe that's what the anatomy is called. Your skin is falling off?
That's a horrifying image. Brock's hand shot to his neck, and sure enough, dead skin and a burning sensation. Felt like sunburn as soon as he touched it. Ow. Oh, well, I mean, yes and no, but that's not good. Sunburn? How? And on the front of my neck? How can that... I see. Of course, the altitude. The dawn sun is practically level with the ring Brock exits his shuttle on. The last 3 days he has spent no small amount of time admiring that view. So, sunburn, right on his neck. He wears a jacket and jeans besides, so it's just his neck. Face has all that stupid skincare on it. Fleek interrupts his thoughts again.
Sunburn? The atmospheric shield should be blocking all harmful radiation.
No, they do, I think. Humans are just a bit vulnerable. Even back on Earth, a fair bit of our star's light gets through the atmosphere, and if we're exposed too long, our skin dies. Then, well, this just kind of sheds. New skin underneath is brand new and raw, and it burns like hell. Fleek's head tilts the other direction.
Humans shed? You shed skin? That is intriguing. I had thought it was only my people and the other furred races that shed. I suppose there is also reptilian species, but that doesn't look like a molt. Does it all come off? Is Professor Oubliette's lecture going to become derailed again into one on human musculature rather than history?
Brock shook his head, which hurt because of the burn. Ow. Again, it bears repeating, ow. No. Well, I mean, I hope not. It shouldn't. It'll be fine. I'll just have to start wearing a scarf or using sunscreen or something. As far as derailing the class goes, I mean, I hope not. I don't exactly enjoy being the center of attention. Fleek nods sagely.
Nor do I. Too much.
Hassle? Brock finished. Fleek's mouth opened slightly, and the very edges of it seemed to tilt upwards, sort of like a grin.
Yes, hassle. That's a good way of putting it. Is L'Ariel trying her luck again at the spaceport?
Brock sighed, shoulders slumping as a tension he didn't know he was holding broke. Yeah, I've seen her type before. They don't really give up when they want something, and I have the unfortunate position of being the hot topic. New species on the block, and Dad is a tycoon that's intentionally making waves in the galactic scene. And apparently humans are just plain weird when it comes to so much. I don't want to be cooped up in any private dorm all day after classes, but it is tough to be here when literally everyone is looking at you. As if to punctuate his point, Brock's gaze briefly sweeps across the hallway, briefly catching the turning heads of gossiping students as they walk past. Fleek nods once again.
I understand. I had a similar experience myself in my first year. At the time, I was called the prolific prodigy of Prangia 4, the first student in a century, apparently, to be admitted to the academy without application on full scholarship. Apparently, one of the academy's scouting teams found a small project I had written on one of my homeworld scientific forums and thought so highly of it that they wanted me here. Given my family situation, I didn't really have much of a choice.
Huh. That explains why he seemed so interested on the first day when Brock said he hadn't applied to be at the academy. Seems he and Fleek have more in common than he thought. Fleek looked a bit to the side, then at his datapad, and then back to Brock.
If you're looking for a recommendation on how to escape the attention, I happen to know a place. Quiet, secluded, excellent view of the city. Perfect for studying. Not somewhere most of the student body cares to visit.
Brock smiled. Bingo. Oh? Where is it? A library? A maintenance corridor? Fleek just shook his own head.
No, it's a ledge, near the tip of the spire. Stair access only. Has nothing up there except a very small viewing room with a window. Though I prefer to sit on the balcony where the high altitude winds can keep me cool. The academy does much to regulate the temperatures to a medium that most species can enjoy, but it's always a bit hot for my taste. The breeze up there is nice.
Now it was Brock's turn to be confused. Aren't you worried about the wind blowing away papers or something? Fleek returned the confusion.
No. Why would I use paper? Datapads are far more efficient and heavy enough to not be so easily swayed.
Brock felt just a teensy bit stupid. Ha. Right, yeah, of course, right. Anyways, yeah, sounds great actually. been needing somewhere to get away from it all, if you don't mind sharing.
Fleek nodded this time. I don't mind. But, your skin is starting to bubble a little bit. Is that normal as well?
Brock felt his neck again. Still ow, but yeah, it was blistering. Shit. He'll have to go to the nurse for some kind of ointment. Does the Academy have a nurse? It has to, right? Not a human one, but the Academy definitely has someone that knows how to nurse humans. For once in his life, Brock was actually hoping on his father's thoroughness. Indeed, the Academy had a nurse. It was as simple as asking one of the little drones that frequently buzzes by for directions, which then escalated into him getting a very small floating stretcher taking him directly to what was apparently an entire school hospital/medical research center a couple levels below, complete with little wee-woo noises and flashing lights. He thought it was a bit excessive, especially when one of the students that saw him pass by shouted and yelled, "His skin is falling off!" Like, seriously? Dramatic much? Once there, the scene was no less chaotic. He went through a dozen different nurses, all doing the same routine of check-in, panicking when they saw his red neck with flaking skin and bubble blisters, and then asking questions and so on. Eventually, a doctor came in and started asking questions. He was an Orion. Most of the people at this academy are, followed by Tripians, and then after that, anything goes. Tall, silver skin, and silver eyes both. His face marks are relatively complex, but got nothing on Oubliette's facial mural, so he must be the Orion equivalent of middle-aged. He spoke with the half-clinical, half-bedside manner of a professional doctor. The Academy was provided with an extensive databank containing human medical records, including yours in particular. However, I have not had the time to thoroughly read through it. It has been communicated to me that it is not urgent. It does look rather concerning, and I would like to run some tests, if that's all right. Brock just shrugged. Sure, I can get notes from one of the other students. Test away, Doc. But, could I get, some kind of ointment or something? Sunburn does hurt quite a bit, and the blisters are gonna sting if I don't get something to help cool it all down and keep it from getting infected. He nodded.
Yes, the nurses did receive a request like that. I believe they are searching through the aforementioned databank for information on how to produce such medicine. This condition is rather unique. Most species have solutions for solar radiation that they employ preemptively, most of which is already employed by the atmospheric shields, so it is rather rare. You are certain that you are not suffering from some kind of radiation damage?
Brock nodded somewhat flatly. Yeah, we have something called sunscreen, but it's not always needed. Our skin has something called melanin in it. That's where the color comes from. And that usually does a trick, but sometimes, especially for those of us with more lightly colored skin, it can get a bit bad if we don't do something. I didn't realize that the altitude up here was going to be a problem, but, I'll be fine. Like I said, just a bit of cream to keep things from getting out of hand, and I'll have some new layers in no time. Just be a bit pale for a while. This time, the doctor seemed seriously confused.
New layers? Human skin can regenerate in layers?
Brock nodded slowly this time. Yeah? Is that not common? I mean, what do you do if you get burned or end up scraping something real bad? Flatly, the doctor responded.
Most species require chemical regeneration or grafts to recover from severe skin damage such as what you have suffered here. Orions, for example, have only a thin sheen of metallo-organic skin protecting our interior anatomy. If it is torn, it requires heat treatment to reseal the breach. If the damage is too great, we have to grow a graft in a vat and replace it. In primitive times, before such technology, crude metal plates were used. Gourd scales are known for their durability, but they do have similar procedures for replacing ones that are too badly damaged. Trepian medical techniques often involve submerging the affected regions in a special fluid from their homeworld containing symbiotic flora that can replace the damaged sections. None of them can simply grow new layers.
Brock nodded again, this time with understanding. Ah, another special human thing, I guess. I mean, I suppose I should mention that technically human skin is always shedding, just not so obviously as this. It constantly grows and dies and falls off and grows and yeah. The doctor's eyes widened. He quickly summons what appears to be some kind of scanning droid and immediately shouts something the translator bead Brock wears in his ears didn't catch. Brock then learned that apparently the entire hospital was supposed to be kept sterile. Something that is normally fairly easy as long as the patients are brought in on the floating stretchers and pass through decontamination, because very, very few species shed constantly, and the few that do are fairly obvious because they have fur and can be taken to special wings. Something Brock ruined by apparently being the only species in the galaxy that sheds skin and passing through the corridors. Faint particles of human skin dust now floating freely across many surfaces. Eventually, however, Brock made it out of the doctor's office and could finally return to school. Except Oubliette's morning lecture would already be over by now, and it's been at least 30 minutes since what Brock considered something of a lunchtime. So he decided to make his way to... Oh, damn it. He never actually got directions to that spot Fleek told him about. Nor did he get anything like contact info. All he knows is that it's stair access only, and he didn't like the idea of walking up every single staircase in the spire just to try to find the one. It's whatever. He didn't have that much time to kill before his next class, an actual biology class, not human-specific. But given how much this academy seems to like its gossip, Brock had a suspicion. It's bi-weekly, so this would be the first actual class for this course in the semester, and it lasts 3 hours. Brock chose it because the other options didn't really line up well with the other courses Brock wanted. That being Oubliette's human history course, a more generic xenocultural studies course, and of course, a galactic economics class. If Brock is going to learn anything here, it's going to be stuff that'll be useful once he's out, and his father starts insisting he get involved in the family business. As for the biology one, it's somewhat generic. Turns out when you live in a galaxy with hundreds of species, just biology ends up being a bit more than a simple high school class. The high school version of it is for your specific species, and then in college it becomes more generic about all of them. Naturally, he got looks the entire way there. Apparently word of his medical emergency has already spread, and given the hushed whispers of, "He doesn't look melted," and, "Are humans red after they molt?" they all heard about that one student's dramatic reaction. Ugh, this is gonna be another headache. The biology class, thankfully, wasn't derailed too badly. The professor, a Trapian woman that Brock couldn't say he wasn't finding hard not to look at her, with sea-green skin and fiery red hair that came down in wavy lines, had him simply quell the rumors at the outset before returning to the main course.
Brock, could you please explain to the class what exactly happened so that we can all shift our focus towards today's subject?
Brock stood. Yes, ma'am. The sunburn. That's it. Just got a bit too much sun because of the thin air up here. I didn't think about it, and so I didn't end up using any sunscreen to block it. The skin's fine, it's just a bit red because of the first few layers being peeled off, no big. One of the other students was shocked.
Peeled off? Your skin was peeled off and it's no big?
Brock shrugged. Yeah, it literally happens all the time for humans. Our skin grows in layers, and the outermost one is constantly losing tiny bits of it. So little that it's basically invisible most of the time. But, get a bit too much sun and suddenly the first layer, or two, loses a bit more than a little bit all at once. This one's pretty bad, it's got blisters, but there's nothing a bit of antibacterial burn cream can't fix. The entire class visibly recoiled at the thought. Humans shed their skin, constantly. Suddenly, a couple of the ones sitting next to him shuffled slightly away. Brock didn't mind. If he was hard to approach, that only meant that anyone that does approach him was serious. Heck, maybe it'll finally get that prep girl to stop trying to use him. But with the brief explanation out of the way.
Thank you for the enlightening explanation, Brock. Speaking of skin, this course will start with the basic principles of the outermost physical functions of...
Brock stretched his arms and popped the joint in his back as he finally walked out of the classroom. Who knew 3 hours of alien biology could be so
Well, no, he definitely knew it was going to be boring, but he had to take something to fill this 3-hour gap or he would go insane making 4 trips to and from the Spire on these days, where he had Oubliette's morning lecture and then an afternoon course on economic theory. Speaking of, he now had about an hour to kill before the next class, and he could already see Lariel striding down the hallway in his direction. She really did her homework, huh? Brock thought to himself, but as fate would have it, Fleek was also in that same hallway, emerging from a more advanced course on cybernetics across the hall. So naturally, Brock took the initiative to avoid having to deal with Lariel.
Fleek, buddy! So good to see you!
Brock happily chirped. Fleek looked up from his datapad, somewhat shocked.
Brock, what are you... buddy? What do...
Brock quickly walked up and wrapped one arm around Fleek's shoulder, leaning in to whisper to him.
Just go with it. Lariel's right there, and I need an excuse to say no to whatever she has planned.
Fleek suddenly locked in.
I understand.
Ah, yes! Brock, ready to study for quantum dynamics?
He said, perhaps a bit too loudly.
Absolutely, my man. Wolf? Can I call you Wolf?
Brock responded, eyes only occasionally stealing glances at an absolutely bewildered Miss Trinidad. Fleek did his best to take it in stride, but he was clearly not used to stuff like this.
Yes, of course you can, buddy. Come, let us go now to study for this very important test coming up.
The two then strode off in a very much random direction away from Lariel, while a half-dozen students looked on in shock. This sudden close friendship between Brock and Fleek was entirely unexpected and unknown to them. The idea that Brock is also in a quantum dynamics course despite being a first year came as quite the news. Lariel, for her part, was stunned into silence. She could tell, of course, how fake it was, but for social reasons did not want to burst into outrage because that is unbecoming of a woman of her status. So instead, she silently stewed as the target of her designs once again eluded her grasp. Brock, for his part, was not expecting Fleek to actually tutor him on quantum dynamics once they'd gotten away and made it to his hiding spot near the tip of the spire.